So you're out on the ice. You've got your auger, your sonar, and a map showing the deepest hole in the lake. You set up right on top of it thinking, this is it, the mother lode, the winter Bream condominium. But then, nothing. Hours go by, and you're just staring at a blank screen. Sound familiar? What if I told you that the spot you were so sure about, that deep winter refuge, is probably the worst place you could be drilling? In this video, we're going to expose why the deepest hole theory is a lie that costs anglers fish year after year. And I'll show you what to look for instead, the real signs of a winter Bream stronghold that most people skate right over. Seriously, what do you trust more, the number on your depth finder or the actual signs of life? For generations, the conventional wisdom has been simple. When it gets cold, fish go deep. It makes sense on the surface, right? Water is most dense and stable at the bottom, so we've all been taught to find the biggest, deepest basin on the map and assume that's where every Bream in the lake is huddled up, waiting for spring. It's an easy rule to follow, and it feels logical. This idea gets passed down from fisherman to fisherman, and it becomes gospel. We see other anglers clustered over these deep spots, which reinforces the belief. But this simple rule ignores the complex needs of the fish. It overlooks things like oxygen levels, food sources, and pressure. We're fishing based on a half-truth, a lazy assumption that keeps us from finding the truly massive schools. Let's start by officially killing the myth. The deepest hole is not a fish magnet. Think of it more like a potential death trap. In many lakes, especially fertile ones, the bottom of these deep stagnant basins is a wasteland. All summer long, weeds, algae, and other organic matter die and sink to the bottom. Bacteria go to work decomposing this gunk, and in the process, they consume massive amounts of dissolved oxygen. By the time the lake is sealed under a lid of ice, these deep holes can become anoxic zones, areas with little to no oxygen. A Bream that settles there is a dead Bream. They are hardwired to avoid these zones. So while you're sitting up top, thinking you're on the jackpot, the fish are actually somewhere else, looking for a place where they can actually breathe. Your sonar might show a deep hole, but it can't show you an oxygen-starved bottom. That's the first piece of the puzzle you need to understand. Forget just depth, start thinking about life support. So, if not the deepest hole, then where? The answer is stability. Bream, like most cold-blooded creatures in winter, want to find a place where they can expend the least amount of energy possible. This means finding a zone with stable water temperature and minimal current. The most stable temperature in a frozen-over lake is typically found in the main basin, but not necessarily at its absolute deepest point. They are looking for expansive flats or very gentle slopes adjacent to that deep water. Imagine a massive, gently sloping underwater plain at, say, 25 feet, right next to a 40-foot hole. The Bream will almost always choose the 25-foot flat. Why? Because it offers a huge area to roam for food without drastic temperature or pressure changes. They can live their entire winter on that flat, only using the nearby deep water as a temporary escape route from predators, not as their primary residence. Your search should begin on these large, stable depth areas. Now let's talk about what they're actually doing down there. They are not just hibernating, they still need to eat. A Bream's winter diet consists heavily of things that live in the bottom sediment, like bloodworms and other aquatic larvae. These food sources thrive in specific types of bottom content. They prefer soft, silty, or mucky bottoms where they can burrow. A hard bottom of rock, gravel, or sand is practically a desert for them. This is where your electronics become crucial, but not for just reading depth. You need to learn to interpret the bottom return signal on your sonar. A hard bottom will give you a thin, sharp, and bright return line, but a soft, mucky bottom, the kind that holds food, will show up as a thicker, fuzzier, or wider line. Some advanced sonars even have a bottom composition mode. When you're drilling holes, finding that soft bottom is like finding a stocked pantry for the Bream. A deep hole with a hard bottom will be empty 9 times out of 10. Okay, let's build on that. We've established that a large, stable flat with a soft bottom is a prime area, but a massive 50-acre flat is still a lot of water to cover. How do you narrow it down? You look for the spot on the spot. Even on a seemingly uniform flat, there are subtle features that concentrate fish. We're talking about tiny inside turns, slight depressions, or almost unnoticeable rises. These might be depth changes of only 1 or 2 feet. Imagine a 25-foot flat that has a small dip down to 27 feet in the middle. That small dip is a natural collection point. It's a microfeature that offers a tiny bit of extra security. The Bream schools will often relate to these subtle irregularities. When you're scanning with your sonar, don't just look for fish marks. Look for these tiny wiggles and dips in the bottom contour line. When you find one, drill a grid of holes around it. You will often find the entire school packed into an area the size of a living room, right on that subtle change. Another critical element is structure. But I'm not talking about massive rock piles or giant sunken trees, which are more common for summer fishing. Winter structure for bream is often much more subtle. It could be a submerged creek channel that snakes its way across a flat. Even though it might only be a few feet deeper than the surrounding area, the edges of that old channel are like highways for fish. They will sit right on the lip of the drop. Another overlooked structure is a patch of leftover dead weed growth on a deep flat. By midwinter, most weeds have died off, but some hardy types, like coontail, can remain. A patch of this dead brown vegetation provides cover and can hold a surprising amount of insect life. It's a feature that breaks up the monotony of the flat. If your underwater camera or sonar shows a transition from clean, soft bottom to a patch of this scraggly debris, that is a high percentage spot to target. It's the winter equivalent of a lush summer weed bed. Let's put this into a real-world scenario. You arrive at a new lake. You pull up your map app and see a big 40-foot basin. The old you would have gone straight to the middle of it. The new you ignores it for now. Instead, you look at the contour lines surrounding that basin. You spot a large, wide-open area between 20 and 30 feet. This is your primary search zone. You head there and start drilling a series of search holes in a line, maybe 50 feet apart. At each hole, you drop your sonar transducer. You're not just looking for depth or fish marks. You're analyzing the bottom signal. First hole, 22 feet, hard bottom, thin red line. You move on. Second hole, 24 feet, still hard. Third hole, 25 feet, and suddenly the return signal gets wider, a little fuzzier. Bingo. You've found the transition to a soft bottom. Now your real work begins, focused entirely in this zone. Once you've found that promising area of soft bottom on a stable flat, it's time to fine-tune your search. This is where you start looking for those micro-features we talked about. You drill a tighter grid of holes, maybe 15 to 20 feet apart, in the area with the soft bottom reading. You are creating a detailed mental map of this small zone. As you check each hole, you might find that the 25-foot depth is consistent for 5 or 6 holes, and then one hole suddenly reads 27 feet. You've just found a small depression. Mark that hole on your GPS immediately. This is your spot on the spot. It's highly likely that if there's a school of bream in the area, they will be relating to this specific feature. You might find the entire school is either in that deeper pocket or on the edge of it. This methodical approach is far more effective than randomly drilling all over the lake, hoping to get lucky by stumbling over a fish. Let's discuss the role of green weeds. While most vegetation dies off, in some clearer lakes, you can find patches of still green weeds even under the ice. These are oxygen factories. Through photosynthesis, they are actively producing oxygen, making the water around them much more hospitable than the stagnant deep basin. Finding these green weed patches can be like finding an oasis in the desert. Bream will flock to these areas, not only for the oxygen but also for the cover and the small insects and invertebrates that live there. An underwater camera is the best tool for this job. Dropping a camera down and seeing a healthy green weed bed in 20 feet of water in the middle of January is often a sign that you are about to have a very, very good day. Don't underestimate the drawing power of the last living plants in a frozen world. They are far more valuable to a bream than an extra 10 feet of water. Now, let's circle back to that deep hole. Does it have any purpose at all? Yes, but not as a permanent home. Think of it as a panic room. The primary reason fish will use the deepest water is for security. If a group of large predators, like big pike or walleye, moves onto the flat to feed, the bream school might temporarily retreat into the adjacent deep water for safety. They will drop down, wait for the danger to pass, and then move back up onto the flat to resume feeding. So, if you are marking fish suspended in the middle of a deep basin, they are often not actively feeding. They are likely spooky, negative fish. The actively feeding, catchable fish will be on the nearby feeding flat. The deep hole is a temporary refuge, not a long-term residence. Fishing the refuge is a low percentage play. You want to fish the kitchen, not the bomb shelter. Another factor to consider is current. Even in a lake, there can be subtle, wind-driven or spring-fed currents under the ice. Bream, in their quest to conserve energy, will actively avoid even the slightest current. They want to find the most still, placid water possible. Areas near major inflows or outflows, or narrow channels between islands where water gets funneled, are often poor choices for winter bream. They will seek out protected bays, or the side of a point or hump that is shielded from any water movement. That big, deep main lake basin might actually have a slow, circulating undercurrent you're not aware of. A smaller protected pocket at a moderate depth could be a much more stable and desirable location for the fish. When you are studying your map, think about where the water is likely to be the most still. That's a key piece of the location puzzle that is often completely ignored. Let's talk about community. Bream are schooling fish, and in winter they form massive schools for both safety and metabolic reasons. It's a numbers game. Finding one bream often means you've found hundreds, or even thousands. This is why spending your time searching is so much more productive than just sitting on a random spot. Your goal isn't to catch a single fish, your goal is to locate the school. Once you find them, the action can be non-stop. This is also why those subtle features are so important. An entire school of fish can pack onto a feature the size of a truck. If you drill 10 feet to the left or right of them, you will see nothing. It's an all or nothing game. This should motivate you to be precise and methodical. The payoff for finding that one key spot is huge. You're not just looking for a fish, you're looking for the entire city. How do you use your sonar to tell the difference between a wintering location and a temporary spot? Look at how the fish are positioned. In a true wintering area, where the fish are comfortable in feeding, you'll often see them marked very close to the bottom. On your flasher, they'll appear as thin slivers of red or yellow right on the bottom line. This indicates they are actively foraging for bloodworms in the muck. However, if you mark fish that are suspended 10 or 15 feet off the bottom in very deep water, be wary. These are often inactive or roaming fish. They might be transitioning or spooked. While you might be able to tempt one into biting, they are generally much harder to catch. The most reliable sign of a catchable school of bream is seeing them glued to that soft bottom on a feeding flat. That's the signal you're in the right place at the right time. Let's not forget the importance of access points and pressure. Fish, even under the ice, are aware of the noise and commotion happening above them. The most obvious, well-known community holes, which are almost always the deepest basins on the lake, get hammered with pressure. The constant sound of augers, snowmobiles, and footsteps can make fish wary and less likely to bite. Sometimes the best wintering locations are simply the ones that are harder to get to or are overlooked by the crowds. A secondary, smaller basin that doesn't look as impressive on the map might hold a completely unpressured school of fish. Don't just follow the crowd. Use your knowledge to identify 2 or 3 promising, less obvious areas. Exploring these spots away from the fishing pressure can often lead to discovering your own private honey hole. The biggest schools are not always in the most famous spots. The time of day also plays into this. While bream can be caught all day, there are often 2 peak feeding windows, early morning and late afternoon. This is when they are most likely to be actively foraging on the flats. During midday, especially on bright sunny days, they can sometimes slide off the flat and suspend over the edge of the deep water. They become less active. This doesn't mean they've left the area, just that their mood has changed. So, if you find a great looking spot but the bite is slow at noon, don't abandon it. Stick with it until that late afternoon window. You might find that as the sun gets lower, the entire school wakes up and moves back onto the flat to feed aggressively. Understanding this daily pattern can be the difference between a skunk and a bucketful. The location is only part of the equation, timing is the other. Let's talk about bait presentation in these true wintering spots. When you've located a school of bream on a soft bottom flat, They are usually in a neutral to positive feeding mood. However, they are still cold water fish with a slow metabolism. They won't chase a bait far. This is why precision is key. Your jig needs to be presented right in their face. A heavy jig that plummets to the bottom can actually spook them. Use a small tungsten jig that gets down quickly but allows for subtle movements. The classic presentation is to pound the jig into the soft bottom a few times, puffing up a cloud of silt. This imitates invertebrates emerging from the muck and attracts the bream's attention. Then, slowly lift the jig 6 inches to a foot off the bottom and hold it perfectly still. Any bites will be incredibly light, just a slight tick or a mushy feeling. You have to be a line watcher. The underwater camera is your ultimate verification tool. A sonar is great for finding fish and structure, but a camera tells you exactly what you're dealing with. Once you've located a promising spot with your sonar, dropping a camera can confirm everything. You can verify the bottom type. Is it truly soft muck or just decaying leaves? You can see if there are leftover weeds. Most importantly, you can confirm the species of fish. Are those marks on the sonar actually the big bream you're after? Or is it a school of small perch or shiners? A camera takes all the guesswork out of it. It can also teach you a ton about their behavior. You can watch how they react to your jig, helping you fine-tune your presentation until you crack the code. It's the single best tool for turning a good spot into a guaranteed producer. Let's re-examine the concept of a transition line. This is one of the most consistent fish holding locators in any body of water, and it's especially true in winter. We've talked about the transition from a hard bottom to a soft bottom. That edge is a hotspot. Another key transition is the edge of a submerged weed line, even a dead one. But the most important of all is the break line, the area where a flat begins to drop off into the deep basin. Bream will not usually be in the deep basin itself, nor will they always be in the middle of the flat. They will often patrol right along that primary break line. It gives them the best of both worlds, immediate access to the food on the flat and a quick escape route into the deep water. Drilling a series of holes directly on top of the line where the slope gets steepest is a top-tier strategy. This is their highway. What about barometric pressure? While it can seem like voodoo to some, it definitely has an impact. A stable or slowly falling barometer is generally associated with better, more active fishing. The fish are more comfortable and willing to roam and feed. A rapidly rising barometer, especially after a major cold front, can shut them down completely. On these bluebird sky days, they may retreat to the safety of the break line or the edge of the deep hole and become very inactive. This is when you might see them suspended and unwilling to bite. It's not that your location is wrong, it's that the fish are in a negative mood. On these tough days, you have to downsize your presentation even more. Think tiny jigs, single maggots, and holding your bait dead still for long periods. Recognizing the impact of the weather helps you adjust your expectations and your tactics accordingly. Let's put all the pieces together into a new, smarter rule. The old rule was, find the deepest water. The new rule is, find the largest, most stable mid-depth flat that is adjacent to the deepest water. Then, on that flat, locate the areas with the softest bottom composition. Finally, within those soft bottom areas, pinpoint a subtle irregularity like a small depression, an inside turn, or the edge of a break line. That is your target. It's a multi-step process. It requires more work than just blindly going to the deepest spot. It requires you to use your electronics as investigative tools, not just as fish finders. But this systematic approach is how you consistently find those mega schools of winter bream, instead of just getting lucky once or twice a season. You move from being a hopeful angler to a strategic hunter. You stop guessing and you start knowing. Finally, trust what you find, not what you've been told. If the community hole over the 50-foot basin is dead, don't sit there all day because that's where they're supposed to be. Have the confidence to leave. Go to that 20-foot flat that nobody else is fishing. Drill your holes, analyze the bottom, and look for those subtle signs. When your flasher lights up with fish stacked on the bottom in 22 feet of water, you'll know you've cracked the code. This knowledge is what separates the 10% of anglers who catch 90% of the fish from everyone else. Fishing isn't about following old rules. It's about understanding the fish and their environment. The deep hole isn't a hotspot, it's a distraction. The real action is happening somewhere shallower, somewhere more stable, and somewhere with a pantry full of food. Now you know exactly where and how to look for it. So, let's wrap this up. For years, we've been told that the deepest hole is the winter promised land. But the truth, the real aha moment, is that it's often a barren trap. The game-changing realization is that the true wintering grounds are the boring-looking mid-depth flats right next to that deep water. It's the combination of stable temperature, a food-rich soft bottom, and subtle structure that creates the perfect bream habitat. The deep hole is just the emergency exit. This completely flips the script on how you should approach a frozen lake. Instead of chasing a number on a depth chart, you're now hunting for an entire ecosystem. You're looking for the complete package: a bedroom, a kitchen, and a security system, all in one place. Thank you so much for watching. If this video made you rethink your winter strategy, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more content that breaks down old fishing myths. And now I want to hear from you. What's the biggest fish you ever caught by completely ignoring the common wisdom and trying something different? Drop your story in the comments below.